also known as Paul Schneider, but mostly as Froggy. I'm going to be talking today about a product called Labtech, and the name of my talk, as you can see, is Making Life at an MSP Easier and More Difficult with Labtech and Automation Techniques. So a little bit about me. I've been working for the past 3 or so years at a managed service provider in Cleveland named Ackerman, using a tool called Labtech that was recently purchased by the folks at Connectwise and has been rebranded Connectwise Automate. It's a really powerful tool that has a lot of great features and also has a lot of great hindrances and kinds of and pains. As I mentioned previously, I co-founded Notacon back in 2003. Our first one was in 2004, so I've been around the hacker scene for a long time. Don't tend to speak a lot. I like to work on the back end of stuff. I like to go to DEF CON, help out other conferences start. So this is kind of my first time speaking about something in a little while. Like most of you, I've been doing IT since I was old enough to read and write. It's just something I've always enjoyed, trying to explore what technology does and does not do. And when it doesn't do something, to try to get it to do it anyways. And that's a really good skill with Labtech, because it's almost kind of like a game engine, where they give you a lot of bare metal stuff and a lot of primitives, and you have to kind of round out what you want the experience to be. So Labtech itself is what we call a remote monitoring and management system, and it uses a MySQL database on the back end, and unfortunately only runs on Windows. But that said, it's still a pretty good tool. There's the list of competitors up there. There's a whole bunch of these kind of tools, and there's a whole bunch of monitoring tools in general, but this isn't just network monitoring. We're not just monitoring network traffic. We're monitoring computers, their uptime, their patch levels, what software is installed, who's been on the machine. So it's kind of an auditing tool to give a managed service provider a complete view of what an organization has, what the organization is doing with that technology, and perhaps what it can be doing better with that technology. Anybody here work at a managed service provider? Does anybody here know not know what a managed service provider is, really? All right, fair enough. All right, well, we have one hand. All right, so a managed service provider, at least in the case of my organization, my company contracts with small and medium-sized businesses, and what we do is we are their IT support. So if you're a small business and you can't afford a full-time equivalent, we are your full-time equivalent. The way we operate, generally speaking, is an all-you-can-eat plan, where you can talk to any of our techs at any time of day and get support on your issue. We handle your backups, we handle your virus protection, we handle going on site if we need to deal with your issues. That means most of our clients are regional to the Northern Ohio area, although we do have some clients in New York City, Boston, Utah, and whatnot. So our job as a managed service provider is to literally manage the various services we offer and provide them options for staying current with technology, giving them recommendations for upgrades and updates and all kinds of other stuff. In the case of Labtech, it's really appropriate for organizations, I would say, with 100 or more clients, 100 or more endpoints. Why is that? Because it's a very complex tool, and it requires economies of scale in order to really get the most from it. I'm always of the opinion of doing as little work as possible to get the job done, as are probably most of you. And if that means I have to brute force something once that I'm going to do maybe once a year, that's what I'll do. Instead of writing a script that'll take me 5 times as long to write. However, in the case of Labtech, if I know this is something I'm going to be doing a lot, it gives me kind of a common platform in which to script this activity that I think I'm going to be doing more and more to make my life easier. All right, so when you're at a managed service provider, these are the things that at least I'm always trying to think of. Now, granted, I'm not the owner of the company. I'm just kind of a lowly peon that runs this thing in the background. But when you're working in a managed service provider, the goal is to give the client the most bang for the buck without actually having to do anything or having to do too much. So that means reducing your labor costs, and one of the biggest labor costs is having a technician spend 45 minutes to go to your location and take care of whatever flavor of the day, malware, problem that you have. But it's also important to try to improve the labor quality because there's so many people offering similar services. Everybody has a couple computer guys or girls they know that they can call on to do stuff. What you want to do is you want to find the problems proactively if you can and deal with those. Labtech is a tool that can help you do that. And hopefully do that faster than some of your competitors. And most importantly, fixing it the first time around. So there's accountability for your clients to know that when you do the job is done right. And finally, in an MSP, in order if you're charging your clients like $5,000 a month for unlimited support, they want to make sure they're getting that value. Because if you know medium and small businesses, a lot of them are penny pinchers. They don't want to drop three grand on a new Dell server for their back end. They don't want to do this. They want to spend as little money as possible. So this means that you want to make sure that you demonstrate to them, here's what you're paying us, here's what you're getting in return, and here's a list, a physical list you can see in PDF or printout of what we've done for you. What patches have we installed for you over the past 30 days? What problems have we identified before you did, such as like bad disks with bad sectors and stuff like that. I swear. All right. I'm trying to work off of 2 sets of slides. That's why I'm a little bit crazy here because I have to extend my screen. Anyway, so you want to make sure your clients know that they're getting value from your relationship with them. All right, so there's a bunch of things that Labtech does really, really well. So we'll start on that before we talk about what it doesn't do too well at all. It's really good at centralizing a wealth of information, and this is where I wanted to open up the client and show you exactly what it stores. But it stores damn near everything you can find out about the hardware, the software, who's been on it, what the current CPU usage is, memory usage, and it graphs these things over time. What scripts have run against this machine in the past 90 days? Were there any patch install failures? One of the big things I've been running into, as probably you have if you run Windows machines, is sometimes Windows Update just doesn't work. And sometimes you have no idea why. And so Labtech is a tool that can at least help you identify what those problems are. And like in my case, I've spent a lot of time automating a lot of routine tasks and maintenance, such as trying to fix Windows Update. As well as, for compliance reasons, we have to log all of these AIM logs and log these to a central server in a read-only format. Well, how do we do that? Labtech is a tool that can help you do that. It's really great at its Windows support. They have a little agent that's really small, just a couple of megabytes, and runs in the background, doesn't eat up processor very much or anything at all, that provides a window for you into that computer and also provides a window back, if you want, to you. So if, say, one of your clients wants to open a ticket, they can do that right from the client. The nice thing is it also provides you a virtual tunnel right to that machine. So that can make it nice for security reasons if you want to get access to just that machine without having to use other remote access methods. I really like that with Labtech now they're on basically a monthly update cycle where every month they'll push out patch fixes, kind of like Microsoft. They'll do roll-ups. Previously their release schedule was once every 6 to 18 months, and that really didn't quite cut it. So their update cycle has been a lot better recently. And as I've learned, there's a huge community of people out there that actually run this thing. And they're very involved with the users. There's a site that I'll link to you later called Labtech Geek. And it's run by a couple of folks who actually write the software. And it's an unofficial site, unofficial support, but it's a great place where people can share scripts, can share knowledge, can share tweaks and tips that aren't exactly authorized. You know, this is kind of where they can play around with certain plugins that aren't sanctioned quite yet. And one of the things that I like is that it has a lot of integration with a lot of different AV and backup vendors, so that it can include that information, so you don't have to look at your backups in one source, your antivirus in a completely different dashboard. It can bring all of that together, and that's really where the value is. So you don't have to look at 13 different places to get the same information. One of the scripts it has, and one of the ones I've worked on, is who here still uses crappy old Windows backups on their server? Anybody? Well, my clients love to. They love Windows Backup because it's free. And so writing scripts that parse what the results of that are and throwing that all into a central database it's really nice, rather than having to go, well, previously what my employer did is go to each machine every day and make sure the backups ran. That's not efficient, that's not fun, that's a waste of time. So we were able to completely get rid of that. And the last two things are of paramount importance. Change management audit trail, right? So if somebody runs a script, it will show in the logs that they ran that script, when they ran that script, what they ran that script against. So if things go sideways, it's easy to trace it back to who did what. You know, not from a blame perspective, but from a, let's talk to so-and-so, let's figure out what the issue is and resolve it. That's a wonderful tool. It's saved my butt a couple of times. Clients have said, well, you know, you installed this patch on such and such a date, and it broke my computer, and I want you guys to buy me a new one. And we're like, actually, our records show you, and here's a printout of all the patches we've installed. And oh look, you installed this piece of software on such and such a date that we told you not to do and not to install, and it crapped out your machine. Oh, well, I guess you got me. So it can be really nice in terms of the cover your ass situations. And finally, granular patch management with Windows patches. One of the things that the newest version of Labtech allows you to do is actually stage patches to certain subgroups, either within a client, an organization, or even a location within an organization. So that, you know, like in a couple of our cases, we have financial firms that trade on the NYSE and manage hundreds of millions of dollars. We don't want to push Windows updates out if we know it's going to host their machines. This way we can stage them first on a couple of guinea pigs, make sure they work, and then push them out to the rest of the organization. A couple of things it doesn't do well. There is built-in ticketing, and it can be really powerful, but by itself it's a little rudimentary, it's a little rough around the edges, and it's the reason that a lot of people use another ticketing system with Labtech. And it's also the reason why Connectwise bought Labtech. So who here uses Connectwise at all for ticketing and anything like that? You're missing out, in my opinion. It's a great platform for ticketing. Now the integration with Labtech is really tight, and it just works. Not necessarily out of the box, but it works pretty damn well. One of the other things that Labtech does is it likes to give you too much information. And as we know, too much information is almost as bad as not enough. And out of the box settings, it'll give you an error if somebody's startup menu is overloaded. It'll throw out an error for every smart error. Every time a disk needs to be defragged. So you have to tweak these things and set them how you want them to, like, okay, if the disk is fragmented, defrag it. You know, stupid things like that. It doesn't take long to do this stuff, but there's so many different things you need to do, and so many different monitors. Last count was about 250 different monitors that run centrally on the central database. That it requires a lot of touching a lot of different parts of the system to get it set up just the way you want it. Which means that there is a steep learning curve to the system. And that's one of the biggest complaints I can have around it. The interface sucks. It's kind of fugly. But once you learn it, you zip along really fast. Unfortunately, getting up to speed for me took me about 3 or 4 months to really understand what was going on. And I'm still learning new things every day that it does because I'm too cheap to try to get certified in whatever their question of the day is, or their certification of the day is. Yes?
So is it scriptable in that when an event triggers, you can auto, like a pub sub mechanism where you auto triggers an event to run?
So the question is, the monitors, are they auto triggers? The answer can be yes. I'll talk about scripting in just a minute. A couple other things here. SNMP support, don't bother. If you have a tool like Auvik or SolarWinds, use that instead for network management. It's way better. Linux and Mac support is there. They have clients for it, but it doesn't let you do a whole hell of a lot. You still have to do a lot of manual touching on those machines, which you probably want to do anyways, to do patch management and a lot of other interesting stuff. And as I said, the interface can be a little difficult to use. All right, so third-party add-ons, as I mentioned, there's a lot of things out there. Connectwise is one of them. It's not really third-party anymore. It used to be, but isn't. Who here uses Chocolatey or something similar? Does anybody not know what Chocolatey is? Okay, so Chocolatey is essentially a poor man's apt-get for Windows, right? It's based on the NuGet platform. If you're a Visual Studio developer, it's the platform they use to let you get plugins and different libraries and stuff like that. So Chocolatey NuGet is basically a set of PowerShell scripts that do maintenance and installation of software. A lot of things: Chrome, Firefox, browsers, Fiddler, tools, even .NET frameworks, just a whole bunch of other stuff. If you go to chocolatey.org, which I give you a link to it at the end of the slides, they have like 15,000 packages, and it's all community maintained. Some of the packages aren't maintained particularly well, but it's a really neat tool, and it's absolutely free, which if you're a sysadmin or an MSP, free is always good. And there are some other tools, like from Squidworks here, there's a front end for Chocolatey that creates a tab on each computer's information pane that gives you a list of icons. You click on the icon, boom, software automatically gets pushed to that machine. And they even have a more advanced version that my boss hasn't paid for, because I don't know why not, we really should, that I wish we had, that would let you actually handle deploying packages to entire locations or organizations. So that could be a really neat tool. That was kind of one of the big things about Windows that I wish it always had, was apt-get, because I'm kind of a Debian guy. And this is, yeah, it makes life a little bit easier for me.
Chocolatey has a pro version now too.
And you're right, they do have a pro version. I completely forgot about that. You're right.
Does it do Java and Adobe?
Yes. Yeah. All right, so in terms of performance, if you were to set up a Labtech server, it doesn't really need a whole lot of CPU resources, but it sure as hell needs a lot of RAM. I run mine in a VM on a VM host with a couple Xeons and 64 gigs of memory. One of the big things that makes Labtech work for me is the fact that I'm able to run the entire database in memory. The entire database for me is about 28 gigs. So I make sure to allocate the InnoDB buffer pool big enough just to hold the whole damn thing. Now, by default, Labtech doesn't tell you to do that. They give you a couple suggestions for tuning it to 4 gigs, but it doesn't really matter. If you have the memory's cheap. Throw as much memory as you can in it, have the whole thing run in memory. Make sure you're not doing your log flushes at every commit. Just have them run one every second or so. So that's why you turn that flag TRX commit at 0. If you lose 2 seconds worth of data, big deal, right? If your Labtech server crashes and your database crashes, you have a bigger problem at hand than losing a couple seconds of data. But in order to keep my database size within reason, I try to keep a couple tables small. One is the script logs table, and that's a log of every action every script takes. That can get big, and of course your event logs. Anybody who has worked with event logs knows that there's so much superfluous bullshit that shows up in event logs. I keep those less than 7 days, and honestly, I keep my event logs to 4 days. If I want more, I'll go to the machine. And usually if it's something really, really important and I haven't noticed it in 4 days, there's a problem there too. Scripting. All right. So in this talk, I said I was going to talk a little bit about PowerShell and Labtech scripting. I'm probably going to talk a little more about Labtech scripting because my boss has asked me not to talk about some of the PowerShell stuff I've been working on, which sucks. But that said, when I'm talking about scripting, Labtech can utilize all of these. And I use all of these within it. So within the native Labtech scripting engine, I call Perl scripts. I call PowerShell scripts. There's command functionality within the Labtech scripting language itself to make PowerShell calls. So that can be really nice. I also run good old DOS batch files and for loops and all that other kind of stuff that we've been doing for 30 years. All right, so as I'll show you in a few minutes with some examples, it's a really high-level language, Labtech scripting. It's not something you can write in text editor and then interpret. It's actually kind of point and click, which makes things kind of slow, but there's a reason for it, and that's because it relies on a lot of data that's inherent to Labtech itself. So there aren't a whole lot of generics that you can use within Labtech. It's all very specific. The nice thing is it allows you access to things like registry keys right off the bat. Labtech keeps a copy of every computer's registry. So if you need to check a registry key, you can check it. If you need to check what the size of a disk is, it already knows. Just all these different state variables are already kept in Labtech, and it allows you to easily get these. It also allows you to access the underlying SQL, which can be both a blessing and a curse. But if you can do a little SQL programming, you can put together some really powerful queries. And the Labtech scripting engine has some powerful SQL data set functionality that lets you iterate over data sets and stuff like that. So that can be really nice. And I call it a pro. For me, it's kind of a pro and a con, the point and click interface. One of the downsides is that it is slow. And sometimes I mean but slow. When you run a script in Linux, or even PowerShell at the console, you see it working interactively, right? That's not the way this works because everything's being audited, every action. So every line of the script is sent by the server to the local machine to run as an auditable command, right? So that means every line is sent line by line to the remote machine to run. This means if you schedule a script to run immediately, it might run now, it might run in a minute, it might run in 5 minutes, depending on when the last time that computer checked in. Obviously, if the computer's not on, it's not going to check in at all, and the script is just going to kind of sit there twiddling its thumbs, waiting for the computer to come back online, or timing out. As I said, the scripts run from the central server in a stepwise fashion. You can only edit these in the Labtech interface. Now, I'm going to show you something at the end where that's not necessarily true. I'll show you how to actually decompile a Labtech script and take a look at it. I think they thought they were kind of clever, trying to obfuscate how they encoded these scripts, but it was kind of easy to figure out. Debugging is painful. In the last version, they added a debugger. I'm serious. Before that, they didn't. You ran a script, pray to God that it actually worked. But now you actually can set breakpoints within commands. You can have it run command by command so you can see where the script is having a problem. That's made it nicer, but honestly, I just, my code's perfect, my shit don't stink, so I make it run first time, every time. I know it's going to work right away. And then when it doesn't, I'll just run it 35 more times because I'm getting paid, right? So, sorry, Eric. All right, so is that really what I was going to talk about? All right, yeah. So yeah, and a little bit about PowerShell. I'm sure most of you know more PowerShell than I do. I'm going to be very honest about that. That's something I've been teaching myself. So I'm not going to go too much on this slide. Although one of the pet peeves I will say is PowerShell sucks in that every different version of Windows seems to have a different version of PowerShell. So writing a script that works on one, like, oh, this script works great on Windows 7. Well, all right, maybe it doesn't work on Windows 8. Or you write a script on Windows 10. Is it going to run on Windows XP? Hell no. Or even between different versions of server. That's kind of a pain in my ass. All right, so I'm going to talk about some personal extensions and scripts, and all the code for this is going to be released at this talk, so if you want to play around with it, you're welcome to. And as it says, these are things I've made in Labtech to make my life suck less. The first thing is there's no version control for scripts inside Labtech. This is bogus. So I built one, because why not? And when I say I built a version control system, essentially what I do is I have a script here that runs every hour on the central server, checks the scripts, and says, has this script been changed in the last hour? If the answer is yes, I store a copy. I take a copy of that line in the database with the script, and I put it in my script archive database. Not a big deal, right? Kind of one of those things you think they should almost kind of have it inherent. And it's one of these things that I want to actually put in real, a more robust version control so I can refer to previous versions. I just haven't had time to do that. But this is at least a nice way of saying, oh crap, like I overwrote the script, or I started making modifications to a script. The modifications I made were stupid and made no sense. How am I going to get back to my original version that I know works? This is the one way to do it. The other way you can do it is make a copy of your script before you start editing it. But if you're like me, I don't ever think about that. So this is kind of my backup plan in case. And this is an example of a Labtech script window. One of the nice things is besides this if true, there's a lot of other conditions here you can put, like if registry key equals this, if there's a certain file name, if a certain file exists in this location, do this. And then there's a then. But there's also that I don't show an else. So it allows you a lot of flexibility to respond to stimuli in a meaningful way quickly. But a lot of the scripts that you'll see start out with if true, because some of the logic you're going to be dealing with might be a little more complex. And in this case, you can see that this is a script, runs once an hour, calls another Perl script, and of course I put the different versions here, so if I get hit by a truck, somebody knows how to recreate what I'm doing and put everything back. And so all it does is basically calls this Perl script and then runs a report and keeps a copy of that report in the database. And this is the stupid little Perl script. It doesn't do a whole lot, but these two little scripts have saved me tens of hours. And it only took me like an hour and a half worth of work. So essentially what we're looking at here, as you can see, is preparing the query. So we'll look at the change time. If there's actually, so yeah, if there are no rows of scripts that need to be archived, we ignore it. Otherwise, we just add them to the database. The other thing I did for my boss that he really loves me for is what's called a morning roundup. One of the things that's really nice when you walk in the morning is to see, okay, what the hell happened today? What happened overnight? What machines were patched? What machines, just what happened overnight? Were there any machines that need to be rebooted? Basically, it's kind of like a morning status alert of what's going on. And as you can see here, it's another Labtech script, if true. We run yet another Perl script. And if Perl's not there, we actually let you know, which is kind of nice. And then we pull some information out and we send it off to the morning roundup script. And at the end of the script, we send the results off to an email, off to a group alias. The script I wrote, the Perl script I wrote, is modular on purpose so that we can add and remove things, reorganize things within it, using some very, very simple CSS to make it actually look pretty. But we want to know where offline servers are, if we had any backup failures, if machines need reboots, and all this patching information. My boss is big about patching and making sure our clients' machines are patched. Patching is difficult because if you have users at remote sites, they don't like to keep their computers on during their patch window. So we like to know these kinds of things. And this lets us know that, oh, Sally has missed the previous 5 patch windows because her machine wasn't on. We can give Sally a call and say, hey, would you mind keeping your machine on and not turning it off, or changing your power management settings? And here's an example of what that script looks like, what that script produced, that Perl script. And again, it's just stupid simple CSS and HTML, and it tells us which master servers are offline. There's our backup failures for Shadow Protect and Windows 2K8. Here's all our servers that we need to reboot. Here's all of our clients that were supposed to patch last night. And I don't know what the hell this is. This whole workstations encountered a patch failure. They didn't give you the computer name. That's a bug I got to figure out apparently. And then there's 115 workstations missing patches. But it tells you, was it offline during the patch window? Yes. Well, now we know that. How many patches are missing? Obviously, you can't apply patches sometimes if the machine needs to be rebooted. Some people who refuse to reboot their machines. They have users that will turn them off at lunchtime and to turn back on. Then you have users who will keep them on for 45, 90 days at a time. So this is the kind of thing that we like to know in the morning, so we kind of know what we're getting into when we step into the office. All right, now for some fun stuff, including demos. All right, so this is going to be painful to do this way, so let me do this. I'm going to show you. This is what a Labtech script looks like when you export it. It's basically just a fugly XML file that has a lot of gobbledygook in it. You can see here is kind of my script header, just to let people know what's going on, script notes. And then there's license data, which you can ignore, and then script data.
I'm not sure we're seeing that.
Yeah, we're not.
You're not?
Look at,
Oh, yeah, because I'm looking at it on my screen. There we go. Is that a little better?
yeah.
Oh, I swear. Thank you. All right, so you have, all right, so there's my script notes and all that kind of crap. And then there's script data. Let's turn on line wrapping. Yes, I know. So script data. Can anybody tell me for a free t-shirt what that looks like? What kind of code does that look like?
Base 64.
Base 64. I heard it in the back. Who said it in the back?
You said it first, and he's supposed to shirt box.
All right. What size?
2X.
That's why I went to a technical school and didn't play sports. All right, yeah, that's essentially base 64 encoding. So I said to myself, self. That looks like base 64. Now, who here knows what the name of the base 64 decoder is within Windows?
PowerShell.
There's PowerShell. There's another one. CertUtil. That's right. What size?
Medium.
Excellent.
Watch the.
Yeah. I'm not too worried. All right. So we're going to do CertUtil. Decode raw text SQ. All right, so let's look at this. SQ. Huh. gzip. Yeah, that might be gzip. So let's call SQ as gzip. Gzip D S G Z. All right, now we have S. And let us get back into Edit Pad. Oh, look at that. All the Labtech script is an XML file that's been gzipped, base 64 encoded, and put into an XML script. Right? When I found this out, I was flabbergasted. I'm like, could it really be that stupid simple that their copy protection is gzip and base 64? And the answer is yes, it is. But this makes it kind of nice for us because there's a lot of things we can do that includes finding a software project that includes all the decodings for all the Labtech functions that somebody had already made. So what we can do is actually write a decompiler that will take this XML file and convert it into something a little more machine readable. Now, as it turns out, the guy who wrote the script that does this no longer maintains it. And I asked him about it, and he said, okay, you're the maintainer now. So now I maintain this script. Have I changed it? Made any updates? No, sadly. But it's out there and available and can be a pretty neat tool. But when we look at scripts, when we look at a Labtech script, like we looked at previously, let me see if I can bring it back up here. All right, so yeah, there's so many different variables and things that are built into Labtech that it's almost impossible. It doesn't even make sense to really have a Labtech script compiler because it relies on so many different variables that are inherent to Labtech itself, which is a little bit frustrating in a lot of ways, but it does make life a lot easier because you realize you just have to deal with what they give you. There's also another thing that I developed, or didn't develop, but that I found in Labtech. In order for Labtech to work, by its nature, it needs administrative passwords, right? It has to get system, it has to have complete control of the system. So if you're going to have a database-backed system that holds passwords, what do we do to the passwords before putting them in?
Plain text?
You fail, Michael.
You hash them.
Well, you hash them, or you encrypt them, or something like that. So that's what they did. They decided that they would put all the passwords in the database, in a passwords table, and they would encrypt them with AES. Good idea. Except, they did this. Here's the problem. Shock and cat block client ID 1. Client IDs in Labtech start at 1. Most people won't have 500 clients. So you can guess with certainty what the first 500 passwords, what the first 500 values are going to be of that. They don't salt it, they don't do anything else. So while they encrypt it with AES, they use a password to encrypt it that is absolutely trivial to guess. And if I wanted to lose my job, I would run it against my current database, and I'd show you. It dumps all the passwords out beautifully. I actually contacted Labtech about this, and they said, this is not a security issue in our product. I'm like, the fuck it is. They're like, no, because you have to gain access to MySQL first in order to do that, or through our system. And our system itself, you haven't found a vulnerability in the outer wall of the system, thus this is fine. Oh, we're only paying God knows how many tens of thousands of dollars a month for this product. You're right, we'll just trust you. So this still has me a little bit bitter, but it also reminds you, if you're going to use this system, make sure MySQL is up to date. And the frustration with this is the version of MySQL they have certified with Labtech 11, which is the current version, has a couple CVEs out there that are on a scale of 1 to 10, 10s. So immediately out of the box, you want to make sure you get MySQL up to the latest version. Disable simple ciphers and other crap that any good vulnerability scanner will give you. And it should make your life a little easier. So other than this kind of big showstopper, Labtech is great. Labtech is great, but you have to be vigilant. All right, so there's some of the links, and again, these slides are going to be available here at thefroggynet.com/LT presentation in a few minutes, as well as a copy of all the Perl and XML encoded scripts. There's a couple other sites here too. If you're looking for third-party tools, Squidworks, I would check it out. Our Labtech Reddit is actually really great. There's also an R MSP. And that's a pretty good Reddit as well for managed service providers. This is the tool that decodes Labtech scripts, and there's a bunch of other crap there that theoretically I'm maintaining. And somebody also wrote a Labtech script to JSON file. I don't know why. Somebody had a use for it, but there's work being done there too. Are there any questions about Labtech, MSPs, My Life, Notacon? Thank you for coming to my talk. That lasted longer than I thought it was going to. I appreciate it. Thank you, everybody, for coming out. First talk of the Freaknik. Thank you for having me. First Freaknik was Freaknik 5, and I'm glad to be back. Thanks. I also have a few more t-shirts up here. People want free t-shirts.